So I've been waiting to do this video for a long time. I'm really excited to talk about eclecticism, which I happen to think is the most important mode of expression in the arts these days. So what do I mean by that? I mean by eclecticism when you take aspects of different genres, different points of view, different aspects of the arts, and you place them together. Now, I would say there's two main ways that you can do this, although they do flow into each other. One of them is mosaic eclecticism. So that's when you take, say, pieces of music or stories or something from different genres, and they're self-contained genres, and you put them next to each other in a larger context. So I used to do this radio station in college because I needed a communication degree, and I thought it'd be exciting to do radio station. And sometimes I just did classical music, but there were also times where I just brought in lots of different CDs from my collection, and I would play some classical, and then I would play some ambient, and then I would play some metal, and then I would play some just regular hard rock, and then I'd play some folk, and that kind of a thing. Or you might say if you got a book of short stories and they had a common theme, but not necessarily the same genre. So maybe the theme is like sailing and nautical stuff. And, you might have one horror story about a ghost ship, and you might have another romantic story about people meeting on a ship, and you might have a historical story about the Titanic. And that would be what I think of as mosaic eclecticism, because within each story or piece of music or painting in an art gallery or something, there's its own genre going on. But when you put them together, you see them in a larger context. And then you can also have what I will call continuous eclecticism. And this is when there are like various genres being expressed within one single piece. Now, the thing is, this becomes kind of a fuzzy logic problem, because at a certain point, it can be hard to tell when you're taking things that are separate and juxtaposing them, and when they all become continuous. And I think as you step out farther and farther, you see more and more continuity of the large piece, just like you would with a mosaic. And I mean, that is the reason, one of the main reasons that I wanted to call this channel Conscious Mosaic, because that mosaic of all these different arts juxtaposed, if you step back and look at my channel in context, yeah, I'm doing a whole bunch of different arts, but you start to see common themes and you start to see a common context. And so I'm creating this, and when I have guests on, and I will be having a decent number of guests on soon for the Batman discussion, you see this larger, broader context. So sometimes it can be hard to tell exactly when mosaic eclecticism becomes continuous eclecticism. So for me, I want you to imagine Ing Venning as a wee little tyke in like junior high or high school. One of the first ways that I encountered eclecticism was through a computer game called Might and Magic 3 Isles of Terra. And I got it, and I loved it, and I played it over and over and over again. And you get to the end, and you discover, oh my gosh, this fantasy world that you've been playing on and fighting all these monsters and doing all these quests on is actually part of, I think it's a spaceship, but anyway, it's a broader sci-fi context. And the idea that sci-fi and fantasy can be part of the same world blew my little mind. It was awesome. I was so excited about it. Grail Quest books. I love fantasy game books anyway. This idea that you can put yourself into the narrative. I mean, everybody has a sort of different personality, and to put yourself into the narrative and to make the decisions your own, that's kind of eclectic in its own way. And in particular, I remember the Grail Quest books by Brennan. I love those books, and they were fantasy books, but they were filled with humor. This nice, dry, witty British humor that I just loved. I just ate up. Mostly Autumn is a group that combine. Now they have two main sort of points of view of music. They have that psychedelic branch where they're influenced by Pink Floyd, and then they have like a Celtic branch where they're influenced by Celtic music. And they bring those together, and they create their own particular sound that blends those two. And you can hear both threads, but the threads become very closely entwined to the point that I would say probably it's not even mosaic eclecticism anymore. It becomes continuous, and it's just their own style. Another good example of continuous eclecticism, I would say, is the series Twin Peaks, because you have drama, romance, horror, comedy, of all these different genres coming together in almost like an intellectual soap opera sort of a thing. And very much in David Lynch's very, very unique style of, I would say, continuous eclecticism. Even though you have sort of mosaic scenes held together, you have all these, it's a part of a larger expression of that director and the writers for that show. Nightmare Before Christmas, I think, is a good example of eclecticism, and the subject matter is eclectic in terms of the holidays, but the overall styles, the musical styles, the styles of animation, things like that, are very eclectic as well. And that, to me, it has its own sort of feel, that sort of an Elfman Burton type of a feel that they tend to do eclectic stuff anyway. So lots of good examples. I mean, I could go on and on and on with examples of eclecticism, but these works just always really excited me and really made me think, this is the future of artistic expression. We're not going to be blocked up into different genres, I think, in the future. I think it's all going to be flowing together. So some reasons that I think eclecticism is so important in our day and age, and just why it's so good for the human mind and emotions and the human experience. So one reason is that eclecticism challenges us. When we read in the same genre over and over again, and we get used to the predictable tropes, or when we listen to the same music and we get used to the same chord progressions and things, it's kind of boring, and our minds kind of get turned off after a while once we've studied that enough. But when we start to put things together, when we start to change them because they're in context, or even just place them in context, it opens us up to this. First of all, it's intellectually challenging, and it's emotionally challenging as well to reconcile those different emotions that are juxtaposed together. But it also opens us up to this sense of surprise and wonder, because we're doing patterning that goes beyond like the normal patterns that we know. We have to take things from known patterns and we have to put them together in new and unique ways. And so I think for that reason, eclecticism is really a vehicle for wonder. And I think wonder is such a crucial emotion for humans, to open us up as intellectual beings, as emotional beings, as beings in context, in relationships with each other, with the natural world, with other humans, things like that. So I think that's really, really important. Eclecticism, it's from a world that's beyond just, the same tropes over and over again. And so eclecticism, when it starts to arise and really coalesce, it shows us that we're in a world that's diverse already, but it also moves us in the direction of a more diverse world, because we're taking all this stuff and juxtaposing it, similar to how we might take different cultures and different races in, say, a country like the United States where I live, and put them together in context. That we're doing that with the arts in terms of eclecticism, and so that shows that it's also a vehicle for diversity, which that's part of wonder. I mean, diversity and wonder go hand in hand, so that makes sense. And also, when I'm talking about diversity, I certainly mean diversity of individual persons, both in terms of mosaic diversity, in terms of like how they are when you put them next to each other, but as well as moving toward continuous eclecticism, because as people start interacting, especially people of very diverse cultures, they start creating a new paradigm and weaving together a new fabric. But also not just persons, but issues. So, for instance, we have a lot of issues in our world that we don't always immediately see as connected. And just some examples here: mental illness and poverty. Obviously, they affect each other, but we don't talk about that as much. We don't, when people come in for mental illness or mental health services, we don't always begin by focusing on the fact that they're in poverty and how that influences mental illness. Now, we're getting better about that, but it's still not one of the first things that we discuss and talk about, when pretty much anyone that's in poverty, especially in extreme poverty, either the mental illness helped bring them into a state of poverty, or definitely the poverty is going to increase mental illness, or create it, or increase it. Healthcare and the environment. Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic that is in many ways influenced by the fact that we are mistreating our planet. But most people don't think of it in those terms. Most people don't think, oh, if we want to prevent pandemics, we need to stop deforesting and things like that. Another one that comes to mind is government and ethics. It seems like government and ethics are so completely separate from each other, and sometimes people are pushing to bring them back together, but we don't see that as often. And really, many people that go into politics, they don't think, oh, I'm doing this because I want a more ethical world. They think, I want more money, I want more influence and power. So it's not just people, it's issues as well. And obviously the issues are related to people. All those issues I just mentioned involve people from various different backgrounds and point of view. And the arts is important to that, right? Because arts can talk to us about mental illness, poverty, healthcare, environment, government, ethics, and just anything that's in our world, the arts can talk to us about. And so this context, also, it can reach the point where it's kind of a meta context, right? Where we are returning to something um, to explore it even better because we've gone out away from it and now we can see it in context. So it's like that undergoing that journey and then coming back to the starting point, right? And we see this again and again in the hero's journey, like the Raglan model and the Campbell models and stuff, where the hero goes out and they do something in a faraway place and they learn a bunch of stuff, but then we see them coming home and applying that to their original context, and we see how different their lives are and how differently they think about their homes when they return. So that's always been with arts, but I think eclecticism does that in a new way by putting something in a context that it wasn't in before, by letting you step back and seeing that starting point in the context of this mosaic, or by the time you return, continuous eclecticism. So I think that's really important in terms of being on a meta level, and I love stuff that's meta anyway. I love self-referring stuff, so that's always something I'm interested in. Another facet of eclecticism, we live in a world that is full of information, way too much information for us ever to absorb it all. I mean, if you just look at the amount of content that is, say, uploaded to YouTube every minute, or, similar Facebook or somewhere, there's way too much content for us to take it all in. And we have to learn to live in that kind of world. And what a lot of people, we need to have good critical thinking skills, good research skills. We need to be able to tell if an argument is logically consistent with other arguments and other information that we're aware of. But one of the things that happens is people get frustrated by all the information and they just decide, I'm not even going to try to analyze the information. Instead, I'm going to follow cult of personality. So we get people that sometimes follow people that aren't the best examples, aren't the best people, because they're frustrated, right? Well, I think eclecticism helps us to develop good judgment of character. So when you see somebody out of their depth, out of their element, in a different context, I think it's easier to be able to accurately, assess, are they a compassionate person, a kind person, a good-hearted person, an empathic person? Also easier to figure out, are they a narcissistic person? Are they just trying to use people? And you also see how they react to being out of their depth, right? Do they react by getting angry and lashing out, or do they react by stopping and listening to everyone and trying to absorb multiple points of view, which is something, obviously, that eclecticism fosters. And I also think eclecticism, and if you know me, I like this, moves us away from capitalism. One of the features of capitalism, one of its tenets, is to make people limited, to reduce them, because it's easier to market to someone if you've reduced them, if they're predictable, if you can exploit the same psychological mechanisms over and over again in their minds through advertising, right? So as we become better judges of character, as we engage our sense of wonder, our challenge, as we see things juxtaposed together that we're not used to being juxtaposed together, it's easier for us to, or it's harder for those mechanisms of capitalism to work on us. It's harder to get branding that will work with us, right? Either branding is going to have to shift, or it's going to, at least in part, going to start to collapse the more we embrace eclecticism. Algorithms, right? I remember creating a radio station on Pandora, and it was like symphonic metal radio station. It was really easy at figuring out who's listed as symphonic metal and playing those same types of bands over and over again, which that's great. I love symphonic metal, right? But that's, it's kind of a limited thing. If all you like is a certain kind of country, a certain kind of rap, it's like, it's going to be easy to do that. I created a couple of Pandora stations. I remember one of them I created with a theme of sedition. So there was some metal stuff on there. There was some folk artists. There was some like rock musicians or light rock. There were some folk musicians there. It was a very eclectic channel, and I wanted it to look for the theme of sedition or rebelliousness or revolution. And Pandora sucked at that. I mean, Pandora would just pick a random song from the seeds that I provided, and it would keep playing songs in a similar genre. And then I would finally get to the point that I'd be like, I'm sick of this genre, and I would tell it, and I would stop it. I would thumb it down, or I would tell it skip to another song. And even when I could finally get it to randomly pick another seed, it would just play stuff in that genre. It did not understand the eclectic seeds that I had given it. It did not understand how to do eclecticism. And most algorithms are like that. Most algorithms are capitalist, and they want to reduce you, limit you to something simple. And as we move away from that, we're going to have to adapt algorithms and hopefully just eschew branding, right? And we're going to have to find better ways to look for arts that we enjoy. We're going to have maybe more of an open mind. It might be a little harder to find what we want immediately. This is something I'm going through as an artist. Like, my work is very eclectic. For example, my short story collection Sources has horror stories, sci-fi stories, fantasy stories, more realistic stories. It's not so much about sticking with a certain genre. It's about wanting readers to engage in that sense of surprise. And you know what? I'm not going to sell as many of those, especially in this day and age when we are just starting to move into eclecticism proper, but when things are still very heavily branded and pretty capitalistic. But I think as we move away from that, there are more people that will recognize my work. At least that's my hope on this channel as well as with my books, because I don't want to just stick to the same tropes over and over again. I want that challenge. I want to give people that sense of wonder to take them out of context. I want that, meta, that self-referring quality, that kind of a thing going on. And so that's why I've chosen to write something that maybe isn't as simple, maybe isn't as pat, definitely isn't as capitalistic, but it's what I'm happy with, and I hope there are people out there that want to read that kind of thing. So why is this post called The Rise of Random? Because eclecticism it's not really random at all. It's about taking that, using your intellect and using your sense of wonder, using your emotions to put things together in a very proper context, in a very, it might not be the known context, it might not be the traditional context, but it's in a context that works. If you just put things together randomly, just as if you put pieces of a mosaic together randomly, you wouldn't get much of anything. Eclecticism is not really about randomness, but I hear a lot of people these days, especially in the last decade or two, using the word random in a very ameliorative way, a very positive light for that word. And they'll say like, oh yeah, I like all this random stuff. I like all these random movies. I like all these random, radio stations and music and stuff like that. And I think they see it in such a positive light because what they're saying is, there's more to me than just this pat genre. There's more to me than, I'm not just the guy that listens to these types of songs over and over again or that believes this or whatever. I think people are starting to grow out of the limited context in which they've been put. And I think eclecticism is a feature of that. So when people use random, I don't think they mean random, but they use it in a very positive light because what I think they mean is eclecticism. Now, real quick, because, hey, this is going to run over because, hey, I love eclecticism and I love to talk about it. And honestly, I could go on and on even beyond the scope of this blog post. I want to talk a little bit about how eclecticism might manifest. So I would love to go to an evening at the symphony, and each movement of the symphony is from a different composer. There's some Beethoven, Brahms, Rachmaninoff, Schumann, whatever it is, put together in a way that works really well to create a new piece out of those older pieces. I'd love to go to a concert where I listen to a symphonic movement, and then I listen to a heavy metal song, and then I listen to a folk artist singing something. And yeah, I get not everyone is going to like that. It's going to be more challenging, but I still would love to see that kind of thing. I would love to see interior design. I'd love to walk into a house and one room is Rococo and another room is, modernist, 20th century modernist, and another room is, and have all these things juxtaposed together in a way that's pleasing, the way a lot of people decorate their houses, just with whatever they like and can find in thrift stores and things. You get that even within the same room, that wonderful eclecticism that can work so well if someone does it well. But also, I think this can go beyond the arts, because, hey, the arts, to me, they encompass just about possibly everything. And work eclecticism. And I was talking with someone from Missouri Jobs for Justice the other day about this. I think that people would be a lot happier if you worked, say, 10 hours a week cooking and 10 hours a week counseling people and 10 hours a week painting and, all these different things, if you put different jobs together, especially for highly stressful jobs. If you had someone that is working as a nurse in an ICU for, 10, 15, 20 hours a week, they don't need to work 40 hours. I mean, let them go do something that's very happy. That let them go to an elementary school and teach children. Let them, people that work for Child Protective Services, that go into these homes and they see the horrible conditions are under. Let them work part of their week in an adoption agency to see that there are hopeful things happening with kids, to increase their morale and to make it so their jobs aren't as bleak. And so I think multiple training, and yeah, I'm sure that the people in charge of the money, the people who never ask, can we afford war or can we afford poverty or things like that, will be the first to say, oh, we can't afford that. But I think everyone would be happier, and I think our jobs would mean more to us. I think everyone should do a certain amount of manual work every week. right? Whether or not you enjoy doing it, it's good. It keeps you from being spoiled. I think everyone should do creative work every week. I think everybody should do work helping others every week. These make us fully realized human beings. I said how eclecticism moves us away from capitalism. In terms of jobs, they want to pair us off, they want to limit us, they want to make us do the same tasks over and over again like machines, but we're people and we're not machines. Interpersonal relationships, judging character, as I mentioned before, psychology and counseling. I happen to do a group where I use music for recovery. So we listen to music and we talk about mental illness in terms of music and how it can help us with our recovery. That will shift at some point to literature, visual arts, gaming, movies, because those things really help us understand our emotions and put our emotions in context, even with other emotions that seem incongruous. So I think eclecticism has a lot of merit and a great future in our world, not just in terms of the arts, although I'm real excited about that, but in terms of our entire experience with, as people. And so that's something that really excites me. So do you have favorite examples of eclecticism? Please let me know. You can comment. You can email me, ing@inventing.com. You can message me. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear how eclecticism affects you, what you think the future of eclecticism is, and what your favorite examples of eclectic arts are. And as always, have a fantastic day.